The distress signal came through at 3 in the morning ship time, and Daniel Harris was the first to hear it. He had been sleeping poorly, as he often did during long stretches between missions, and the soft alarm pulled him from a dreamless rest into the cold blue light of the medical bay, where he had fallen asleep reviewing patient files. The signal was faint, broken, and desperate. Commander Lisa Grant's voice crackled over the intercom within minutes, calling all senior crew to the bridge, and Daniel grabbed his medkit before running through the narrow corridors of the starward dawn. When he arrived, the bridge was already crowded with tension. Nathan Cole stood at the engineering console, his fingers flying across the controls as he tried to boost the signal, and Commander Grant stood at the center of the room with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. "It's a royal transport," Nathan said without looking up. "Cathari Empire markings, and it's falling apart out there." Daniel felt his stomach drop. The Cathari were one of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy, ancient and proud, and utterly dismissive of humanity. They had ships that could cross star systems in hours, technology that made human vessels look like children's toys, and a reputation for solving problems with overwhelming force. What could possibly damage one of their royal transports? "How far?" Commander Grant asked. 20 minutes at full burn," Nathan replied. "Then burn," she said, and the ship lurched forward into the dark. Daniel spent those 20 minutes checking his supplies and trying to remember everything he knew about Cathari biology, which was not much. They were humanoid roughly, with silver-tinted skin and blood that carried oxygen through crystalline compounds rather than iron. Their average lifespan was measured in centuries, and their immune systems were sophisticated enough to fight off most diseases before symptoms even appeared. He had never treated one, had never even met one in person, and the thought of being responsible for alien royalty made his hands shake. The wreckage came into view like a wounded animal drifting through space. The transport had been beautiful once, Daniel could tell, all elegant curves and shimmering hull plating, but something had torn through it from the inside. Scorch marks spread across the surface like burns on skin, and whole sections of the ship were open to the vacuum. "Life signs?" Commander Grant asked. "One," Nathan said quietly. "Barely." The boarding team moved fast. Daniel was among them, his med kit strapped to his back and his heart pounding in his chest, and they crossed into the ruined ship through an emergency airlock that groaned with every step. The interior was worse than the exterior. Bodies lay in the corridors, Cathari guards in ornate armor. Silver blood pooled beneath them in frozen puddles. Whatever had happened here had been violent and sudden and merciless. Daniel tried not to look at their faces as he stepped over them. The single life sign led them to a chamber deep in the ship's core, a room that might have been luxurious before the attack, but was now filled with smoke and shattered glass. And there, lying on the floor in a spreading pool of her own silver blood, was a young woman. She was beautiful, in the way that alien things are often beautiful. Strange and familiar at once, with features that almost looked human, but not quite. Her skin was pale silver, her hair was white as snow, and her eyes, when they flickered open to look at Daniel, were the deep purple of a dying star. "Help," she whispered in a voice that the translator rendered as barely more than a breath. "Please." Daniel dropped to his knees beside her, and began scanning immediately. Sense at first, all wrong, all critical, until he realized what he was seeing. Her blood was dying. Something had contaminated it, a toxin of some kind, something engineered to destroy the crystalline compounds that carried oxygen through her system. Her body was suffocating from the inside, and there was nothing in his kit that could stop it. "I need to get her back to the ship," he said to the team, "now." They carried her through the wreckage and across the void and into the medical bay of the starward dawn, and Daniel worked through the night, trying to find a solution. Commander Grant stood in the doorway for hours, watching, her face unreadable. "Do you know who she is?" she asked at some point. Daniel shook his head without looking up from his screens. "Princess Valara of Kethrion," the commander said. heir to the entire Cathari Empire, and if she dies on my ship, we might start a war. Daniel's hands paused for just a moment, before he forced them to keep moving. A princess, a dying princess, and he was a medic from Ohio who had joined the space program because he wanted to help people. He was not qualified for this. No one was qualified for this. But she was dying, and he was here, and that had to be enough. He ran every test he could think of, cross-referenced every database he could access, and slowly a terrible picture emerged. The toxin was destroying her blood cells faster than her body could replace them. A transfusion was the only option, but Cathari blood was incompatible with every species in the Coalition's medical records. There was nothing that could save her. Nothing except... Daniel stopped, staring at his screen, his breath caught in his throat. Human blood. The molecular structure was different, yes, but not entirely. The iron-based hemoglobin that carried oxygen in human blood shared certain properties with the crystalline compounds in Cathari blood. Enough that with modification, with careful filtering and adjustment, it might work. It was insane. It was impossible. It was the only chance she had. "Commander," Daniel said slowly, "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." He explained what he wanted to do, and Grant's face went pale. "You want to put your blood into an alien princess," she said flatly. "I want to save her life," Daniel replied. The silence stretched between them for a long moment. "Do it," Grant finally said, "and pray you're right." Daniel worked for 3 more hours, modifying his own blood with the ship's limited equipment, filtering out what might harm her, and enhancing what might help. When he finally began the transfusion, his hands were steady, even though his heart was not. The crew gathered outside the medical bay, watching through the windows, and no one spoke. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Valara lay still on the table, her breathing shallow, her vital signs flickering like a candle in the wind, and Daniel sat beside her, refusing to look away. Then, slowly, impossibly, her readings began to stabilize. Her breathing deepened. Color returned to her silver skin. Her eyes opened, and she looked at Daniel with an expression he could not read. "Bonded," she whispered in her own language, and the translator hesitated before rendering the word, as if it was not sure what it meant. Daniel did not understand, but he would. He would understand very soon, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 days after the transfusion, Princess Valara took her first steps through the corridors of the Starward Dawn, and every crew member she passed stopped to stare. Daniel walked beside her, ready to catch her if she fell. But she did not fall. She moved with a grace that seemed impossible for someone who had been dying just 72 hours earlier. Her silver skin glowing with health, her purple eyes bright and curious as she examined the human ship around her. "Your vessel is small," she said, and Daniel could not tell if she meant it as an insult or simply an observation. "We make do with what we have," he replied. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something strange passed across her face. "You are the one who saved me," she said, "the one who gave me his blood." Daniel nodded, uncomfortable under her gaze. "I did what any medic would do," he said. "No," she said softly. "You did what no one in my empire would have done for me. A stranger. You gave a part of yourself to someone you did not know, and that is not a small thing among my people." She reached out and touched his arm, just briefly, and Daniel felt something like an electric shock run through his body. He gasped and stepped back, his heart suddenly racing, and Valara's eyes went wide. "You felt that," she said. "What was that?" Daniel demanded. "The Varathi," she whispered, and there was fear in her voice now. Real fear. It cannot be, it should not be possible. Before Daniel could ask what she meant, she turned and walked quickly back toward the medical bay, and he had no choice but to follow. She would not explain. Not at first. She sat on the edge of the medical bed and stared at her hands, as if she had never seen them before. And Daniel waited, because he did not know what else to do. "Among my people," she finally said, "blood is sacred. It carries not just life, but essence, memory, emotion, spirit, everything that makes a person who they are." Daniel listened, his confusion growing. "In ancient times, before my civilization became what it is now, there was a ritual called the Verathai, a bonding of blood between two souls. It was the deepest connection two beings could share, more intimate than marriage, more permanent than family." She looked up at him, and he saw tears forming in her purple eyes. The ritual was forbidden thousands of years ago, because it was considered too dangerous, too powerful, and over time, it was forgotten. Most believed it was only a myth. "But it's not a myth," Daniel said slowly. "No," Valara replied. "It is real, and when you gave me your blood, when your essence mixed with mine, you awakened something that should have stayed sleeping." Daniel sat down heavily in a chair across from her. "What does that mean?" he asked. "What happens now?" "We are connected," she said. "Your emotions will bleed into mine. My thoughts will whisper at the edges of your mind. We will feel each other's pain and joy, and the connection will only grow stronger with time." Daniel opened his mouth to say that was impossible, that he was just a human medic, and she was an alien princess, and things like this did not happen in real life. But then he realized he could feel her fear. It was not his own fear. It was hers, sitting in his chest like a cold weight. And when he focused on it, he could almost see her thoughts swirling beneath the surface. "I can feel you," he said. "And I can feel you," she replied. They sat in silence for a long moment, both of them trying to understand what had happened and what it meant. Daniel thought about his life, his ordinary life, his job on the ship, and his friends and his family back on Earth, and none of it seemed to fit with what was happening now. He was a medic from Ohio who had wanted to help people, and now he was bonded to an alien princess through some ancient mystical ritual. "Can it be undone?" he asked. Something that might have been hurt flashed through their connection, and Valara looked away. "I do not know," she admitted. "There are records, ancient texts, but they have not been studied in centuries, and even if there is a way, my uncle would never allow it." "Your uncle?" "High Regent Zorath," she said, and her fear deepened. "He rules the empire in my name until I come of age to take the throne, but he does not want to give up his power." Daniel felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. "The attack on your ship," he said. "The toxin in your blood. Was that him?" Valara nodded slowly. "I cannot prove it, but I know it was him. He has wanted me dead for years, and now that I have survived, now that I am bonded to a human, he will be even more desperate." "Why?" "Because the Varathai is forbidden," she explained. "If the Empire learns what has happened between us, I could be stripped of my title, exiled, or worse. And you would be seen as a threat, a corruption, something to be eliminated." Daniel felt cold. "So we're both in danger." "Yes," Valara said, "but there is something more." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "I am healing faster than I should, much faster, and I feel stronger than I did before the attack. I do not know why." Daniel's medical training kicked in and he pulled up his scanner. "Let me run some tests." He spent the next hour examining her, comparing her current readings to the ones he had taken when she first arrived. And what he found made him sit down again. "Your cells are regenerating at twice the normal rate," he said, "and there are new markers in your DNA, markers that match human genetic sequences." Valara turned to look at him. "What does that mean?" "I think my blood did more than save you," Daniel said slowly. "I think it changed you, enhanced you somehow." Before either of them could say more, the ship's alarm began to wail. Nathan's voice came over the intercom, tight with urgency. "All hands to stations. We have incoming vessels, Cathari military signature, and they are not responding to hails." Valara's fear spiked through their connection. "My uncle," she said. "He knows I survived, and he is coming to finish what he started." Daniel grabbed her hand without thinking, and the contact sent another jolt through them both. But this time, neither of them pulled away. "Then we run," he said. She looked at him, this strange human who had given his blood to save a stranger, who was now bound to her by forces neither of them fully understood, and she nodded. "Together," she said. "Together," Daniel agreed. And as the starward dawn turned to flee into the unknown darkness of space, Daniel Harris realized that his ordinary life was over. Whatever came next, whatever dangers waited ahead, he would face them with an alien princess at his side and a bond in his blood that no one in the galaxy had seen for thousands of years. He did not know if he was ready, but he knew he would not run away. The Starward Dawn had never been built for running, but Commander Lisa Grant pushed it harder than it was ever meant to go. For 5 days they fled through uncharted space, jumping from system to system, always staying one step ahead of the Cathari fleet that hunted them. Nathan Cole lived in the engine room during those days, coaxing power from systems that should have failed, keeping the ship alive through sheer stubbornness and engineering genius. And through it all, Daniel stayed close to Valara, learning what it meant to be bonded to another soul. The connection between them grew stronger with each passing hour. At first it was just emotions, her fear bleeding into his calm, his hope lifting her despair. But soon it became more. He would catch glimpses of her memories when she slept, fragments of a childhood spent in glittering palaces, lessons with stern tutors, the crushing weight of expectation that had followed her since birth. Feel echoes of his past, the small town in Ohio where he grew up, the day he decided to become a doctor, the moment he first saw the stars from orbit and knew he would never go back to Earth. They did not speak of these shared visions at first, both of them too uncertain, too afraid of what it meant. But one night, when the ship was quiet, and the stars outside the window seemed very far away, Valara found Daniel in the observation deck and sat beside him. "Tell me about your world," she said. Daniel looked at her, this silver-skinned princess who had been raised in luxury he could not imagine, and he wondered what she would think of Earth. "It is not like your worlds," he said. "It is small, it is messy, it is full of problems we have not figured out how to solve." "But you love it," she said, and it was not a question, because she could feel the truth of it through their bond. "Yes," Daniel admitted, "I love it. I love the forests and the oceans, the cities where millions of people live on top of each other. I love the way humans never stop trying, never stop building, even when everything seems impossible." Valara was quiet for a moment, processing his words and the feelings behind them. "My people have forgotten how to try," she said softly. "We are old. We are powerful. We believe we have already discovered everything worth discovering, and because of this, we have stopped growing." She turned to look at him, and through their bond, Daniel felt something like wonder. "But you, humans, you are so young, and yet you carry something inside you that we lost long ago, something bright, something fierce." "What is it?" Daniel asked. "Hope," she said. "Stubbornness, the refusal to accept that anything is impossible. I felt it when your blood first entered my body, and I feel it still, burning inside me like a second heart." Daniel did not know what to say, so he said nothing. In comfortable silence, as the stars drifted past. The next morning, Nathan called Daniel to the engine room with excitement in his voice. "You need to see this," the engineer said, pulling up screen after screen of data. "I have been analyzing the medical readings you took of the princess, comparing them to the scans from when she first arrived." Daniel looked at the numbers, but he was not sure what he was seeing. Her DNA is changing, Nathan explained. Not just healing, actually evolving, and the new sequences match human genetic markers almost perfectly. What does that mean? Daniel asked. Nathan leaned back, his eyes wide with amazement. It means that human blood did not just save her, it made her better, stronger, faster, more adaptable. It is like our biology contained some kind of enhancement factor that her species never developed. Daniel thought about what Valara had said, about how her people had stopped growing. Young, he said slowly, we are still evolving, still changing. Maybe that is what makes us different. Nathan nodded. And if word gets out about this, if the galaxy learns that human blood can enhance other species, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Daniel understood immediately. If High Regent Zorath discovered what human blood could do, he would not stop at killing the crew of the Star Wars Dawn. He would want more human blood, an endless supply, and he had the power to take it by force. Earth would become a resource to be harvested. Humanity would become livestock. Daniel found Valara in the medical bay, reading through the ship's database, and he told her what Nathan had discovered. She listened in silence, her face growing pale, and through their bond he felt her horror mixing with something else. Determination. I will not let that happen, she said when he finished. I will not let my uncle turn your people into slaves. How can we stop him? Daniel asked. He has an entire fleet, an entire empire, and we have one ship. Valara stood, and there was fire in her purple eyes. We have more than that, she said. We have the truth, we have evidence of his crimes, and we have something he does not expect. What? Each other, she said, taking his hands in hers. The Varasai makes us stronger than either of us alone, and there are those in my empire who still remember the old ways, who will recognize what we share and understand what it means. Daniel felt her certainty flowing through their bond, and slowly his own doubt began to fade. So we fight, he said. We fight, she agreed. Not just for your people or mine, but for both, because that is what the Varasai was always meant to be. Two souls becoming one, two peoples finding strength in each other. The ship shuddered suddenly. Intercom. Commander, we have a problem. The Kethari fleet just jumped ahead of us. They are cutting off our escape route. Daniel and Valara ran to the bridge together, their hands still linked, their minds still connected. Commander Grant stood at the center of the chaos, barking orders, trying to find a way out that did not exist. We cannot outrun them, she said when she saw Daniel and the princess. And we cannot fight them. So unless you have a miracle in your pocket, I am open to suggestions. Valara stepped forward. There is a neutral station, she said. 3 jumps from here. It is sovereign territory. Even my uncle cannot attack us there. And then what? Grant demanded. Valara smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had finally found a reason to fight. Then we tell the galaxy what he has done, she said, and we let them decide who deserves to rule. Grant looked at Daniel, then at the princess, then at the fleet, closing in around them. 3 jumps, she said. 3 jumps, Valara confirmed. The commander nodded once. Then let us move. And the starward dawn burned toward Sanctuary, carrying within it a secret that would change the galaxy forever. The neutral station hung in space like a jewel, massive and ancient, built by civilizations that had died before humanity learned to write. They called it the Crossroads, and it was the one place in the galaxy where no empire could make war. Ships from 100 different species docked at its ports, and diplomats from across known space walked its corridors, negotiating treaties and trade agreements. It was here that Ambassador Kira Voss represented Earth, fighting for humanity's place among the stars, and it was here that the Starward Dawn finally found safety. The docking procedures took hours, and by the time Daniel stepped onto the station, his legs were shaking from exhaustion and relief. They had made it. Against all odds, against an empire that wanted them dead, They had survived. But survival was only the beginning. Commander Grant arranged a meeting with Ambassador Voss before they even left the ship, and Daniel could see the tension in the older woman's face as she waited for them in the station's diplomatic quarter. Kira Voss was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, and she had spent 30 years fighting for Earth's interests in a galaxy that barely acknowledged humanity existed. When she saw Princess Valara walking beside Daniel, her expression flickered between shock and calculation. "You brought royalty onto my station," she said flatly to Commander Grant. "Cathari royalty, the one species that has voted against human interests at every council meeting for the past decade." "She would have died without us," Grant replied, "and there are things you need to know." They told her everything: the attack on the royal transport, the toxin, the transfusion, the Verathai bond, and most importantly, the truth about High Regent Zorath. Voss listened without interrupting, her face growing more troubled with each revelation. "You understand what you are asking me to do?" she said when they finished. "You want me to accuse one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy of attempted murder based on the word of a human medic and a princess who might be lying to save herself." "I am not lying," Valara said, and there was steel in her voice. "Then prove it," Voss replied. Valara did. She provided data recordings from her ship's black box, communications that had been encrypted, but not well enough, genetic analysis of the toxin that showed it came from laboratories controlled by her uncle's allies. She showed medical scans that proved the damage to her body, and she showed something else too. She showed the bond. Daniel stood beside her as she demonstrated the Verathai to Ambassador Voss and the other diplomats who had gathered to witness. He held her hand, and through their connection they shared thoughts, emotions, memories, in ways that no technology can fake. They were seeing. They whispered among themselves, their translator devices struggling to keep up with a dozen alien languages. "The Verathai was supposed to be a legend," one of them said. "A being with crystalline skin and too many eyes. If it truly exists, if it can truly be formed with humans, then everything we thought we knew about your species is wrong." Word spread quickly. Within hours, diplomats from across the station were requesting audiences with the human ship's crew. Some came out of curiosity, others out of political interest, but all of them left with the same expression of surprise. Humans were no longer the young, primitive species that could be ignored. They were something else, something unknown, something potentially powerful. And High Regent Zorath knew it too. His response came in the form of a message broadcast to the entire station, denouncing Valara as an imposter, claiming she had been corrupted by humans' influence, demanding that she be returned to the Empire for questioning. But his words rang hollow against the evidence. Cracks began to appear in his support. A faction within the Cathari military, officers who had served under Valara's parents before Zorath took power, quietly reached out to the crossroads. They believed the princess. They believed the truth, and they were willing to fight for it. Ambassador Voss worked without sleep for 3 days, building alliances, making promises, calling in favors she had been saving for decades. Earth's government, recognizing both the danger and the opportunity, pledged full support to Princess Valara. Human ships began arriving at the station, not many, not powerful by galactic standards, but enough to show that humanity stood with its newfound ally. Daniel watched all of this from the edges, uncertain of his place in the political storm that swirled around them. He was still just a medic, still just a man from Ohio who had wanted to help people, and the scale of what was happening made him feel very small. Valara found him on the observation deck one evening, staring out at the gathered fleet. "You are worried," she said, feeling his emotions through their bond. "I am scared," he admitted. "Not for myself, but for what happens next. If we fail, if your uncle wins, a lot of people are going to suffer." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I have been thinking about what you told me," she said. "About humans, about how you never stop trying, never stop fighting, even when everything seems impossible." Daniel looked at her. And I think I understand now," she said. "Your species has known hardship that mine forgot long ago. You have faced extinction and survived. You have built civilizations from nothing, and watched them fall and built them again, and each time you came back stronger." She took his hand, and through their bond he felt her resolve. "That strength is inside me now," she said. "Your blood gave it to me, and tomorrow, when I stand before the council and demand justice, I will carry your hope with me." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You will not be alone," he said. "Whatever happens, I will be there." She smiled, and for a moment she looked not like a princess, but like a young woman facing an uncertain future, with courage she had borrowed from someone else. "I know," she said. "That is what the Verathai means. That is what we are. Two souls, one purpose." The next day, Valara addressed the Galactic Coalition. She stood in the great chamber with Daniel at her side, and she told her story to representatives from 1,000 worlds. She showed them the evidence of her uncle's crimes. She showed them the bond that connected her to a human, and she asked them to choose. Immediately, allies of Zorath who had too much to lose. But others listened. Others believed. And when the voting was done, when the alliances were drawn, the princess who had nearly died alone in space found herself leading a coalition that spanned species and systems. Human ships stood beside alien rebels, united against corruption, united in hope. The battle for the throne had begun, and Daniel Harris, medic from Ohio, stood at the heart of it all, bound by blood to a princess who had become something more than she was ever meant to be. The battle above Kethrion Prime began at dawn, ship time, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. High Regent Zorath's fleet outnumbered the rebel forces 3-1, with ships that had been built over centuries, weapons that could crack moons, and crews that had trained their entire lives for war. Against them stood a collection of outcasts, rebels, and humans who refused to accept that they were meant to lose. The starward dawn flew at the center of the Allied formation, and Daniel stood on the bridge, watching the impossible unfold. Human ships, small and fast and fragile, darted between the massive Kethari vessels like insects around giants. They could not match their enemies in firepower, but they could outmaneuver them, outthink them, surprise them in ways that centuries of military tradition had never prepared them for. Commander Grant barked orders with calm precision, coordinating attacks, directing fire, turning the chaos into something that almost resembled a plan. Nathan Cole pushed the engines beyond every limit, squeezing power from systems that should have failed hours ago. And through it all, Daniel felt Valara beside him. Not physically, but through their bond, her presence steady and strong, even as she prepared for what came next. "It is time," she said through their connection, her thoughts crystal clear in his mind. "I know," he replied. While the battle raged in space, Valara led a strike team to the surface of her homeworld. Daniel insisted on joining her, and she did not argue, because she knew through their bond that nothing could have stopped him. They landed in a garden that had once belonged to her mother, now overgrown and forgotten, and fought their way through the palace that had been her childhood home. The Kethari guards who remained loyal to Zorath were fierce, but Valara was fiercer. Her body moved with speed and strength that should have been impossible, enhanced by human blood, driven by human determination. She cut through her enemies like a storm, and Daniel stayed at her side, not fighting, but watching, protecting, ready to act if she faltered. She did not falter. The throne room doors shattered beneath her hands, and they found High Regent Zorath waiting for them. He was old, older than Valara by centuries, with silver skin that had faded to gray and eyes that burned with hatred and fear. So the child returns, he said, his voice echoing through the empty chamber. Corrupted by alien blood, leading alien ships against her own people. You tried to kill me, Valara said. You murdered my guards, my physicians, everyone who stood between you and the throne. I did what was necessary, Zorath replied. Your parents were weak. They wanted to open our empire to lesser species, to share our power with creatures barely out of the caves. I saved our people from that fate. Saved nothing, Valara said. You ruled through fear, through isolation, through violence, and now your empire stands against you because they finally see what you truly are. Zorath smiled, and there was something terrible in it. You think you have won, he said, but you do not understand. The bond you share with this human, this Verathai that you flaunt like a badge of honor, it is your weakness, not your strength. He raised his hand, and Daniel saw a device hidden in his palm, small and dark and humming with power. I have had centuries to study the old texts, Zorath continued. I know what the Verathai truly is, and I know how to destroy it. He pressed the device, and pain exploded through Daniel's body. He fell to his knees, screaming, and across the room, Valara collapsed as well. Through their bond he felt the connection tearing, ripping apart like flesh being pulled from bone, and he understood what Zorath was doing. Severing the Verathai by force, killing them both in the process. The pain was beyond anything Daniel had ever experienced. It was not just physical, it was spiritual, existential, the very essence of his being torn away from something that had become part of him. He could feel Valara dying through their bond, could feel her light fading, and he knew that if he did not act, they would both be gone in moments. But Daniel Harris was human, and humans did not give up. Instead of fighting against the severance, instead of trying to hold the bond together, he pushed through it. He gathered everything he was, every memory, every hope, every stubborn refusal to accept defeat, and he sent it flooding through the connection into Valara. Not to save himself, to save her. The bond did not break. It transformed. For one impossible moment, Daniel and Valara were not two beings, but one. Their minds merged, their souls intertwined, strength combined into something neither could have achieved alone. Valara rose. She blazed with borrowed human fire, with determination that had been forged in millions of years of human struggle, with hope that had survived every disaster humanity had ever faced. Zorath's face went pale with terror. Impossible, he whispered. Valara moved faster than sight, crossing the throne room in an instant, and her hand closed around her uncle's throat. Nothing is impossible, she said. That is what humans taught me. The device fell from his fingers, and the pain stopped. Zorath hung in her grip, defeated, broken, and for a long moment Valara stood motionless, deciding his fate. Then she threw him to the ground. You will live, she said. You will stand trial for your crimes before the people you claim to protect, and you will watch as everything you built crumbles around you. Guards loyal to the princess flooded the throne room, and Zorath was dragged away in chains. Daniel lay on the floor, exhausted beyond words, barely conscious, but through their bond he felt Valara kneeling beside him. You saved me, she whispered. Again. We saved each other, he managed to say. She smiled, and tears ran down her silver cheeks. 3 days later, Daniel woke in a bed softer than anything he had ever known, in a room filled with golden light. Valara sat beside him, watching, waiting, and when his eyes opened, she took his hand. The battle is over, she said. Zorath has been judged, the fleet has surrendered, the empire is mine. Daniel tried to sit up, but his body refused. The bond, he said, is it still? It is still here, she said, pressing her other hand to her chest. Changed, but unbroken. We are still connected, Daniel. We will always be connected. He lay back, processing this, trying to understand what it meant. What happens now? Asked. Now I rebuild, she said. I open my borders. I welcome your people. I try to undo the damage my uncle caused, and I hope that we can create something better together. Humans and Cathari, side by side. She squeezed his hand. I was going to offer you honors, she said. Titles, wealth, everything my empire could provide. But, Daniel asked. But I know through our bond that you do not want those things, she said. So instead I ask you, stay with me, not as a consort or a prince, but as a partner. Help me build this new world. Daniel looked at her, this alien princess who had become part of his soul, and he felt her hope mixing with his own. Yes, he said. And across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered at what had happened. Humans, the young species, the primitives, had stood against an empire and won. They had shown that their blood carried something remarkable, not just the power to heal, but the power to change everything. The age of humanity had begun, and it started with a medic from Ohio who gave his blood to save a stranger, and found something far greater in return.